Hi, it's Amanda Cassar from Wealth Planning Partners, and I am back with Alex Minter from the Astute Property Network. Now, we've been fielding a few calls, Alex, both of us, from clients and interested people regarding the COVID-19 or coronavirus situation and property. So, just wanted to have a quick chat with you. Again, we know property goes in cycles, and where would we be looking in a usual market cycle that this coronavirus pandemic has broken into the Aussie property market?
Yeah, so look, I think it's trying to understand. Nobody has a crystal ball to.
Oh,
uh,
mine broke years ago.
yeah, as, well, nobody has that crystal ball to predict what exactly is going to happen. But look, I think what a lot of economists and research houses are doing, including us, is I guess we're going back and understanding how these cycles have evolved and what has happened during these cycles historically. There's a very few key points and clear indicators that have come up for us, I guess, especially after doing plenty of research. But I'm just going to share a screen with you, Amanda, which which is understanding the mid-cycle downturn. So
The scary part.
if we look at this here, I'm just getting my pen out. So different times may require different thinking. Now, I think we can all agree we are in different times, and times we have never really experienced. Now, what's very clear after reading what these economists have put out, the US economy has moved according to a set cycle for close to 200 years. Now, the economy appears to rise and fall like clockwork at times, which heavily impacts other global markets like Australia. And the reason I think it's why these economists follow America closely and in recent times China is when America sneezes, Australia gets a cold, right? So we are looking, what has happened historically over there, as well as Australia as well. Now, work has been done by a number of non-mainstream economists who have historically identified a very clear 18-year real estate cycle. Now, the cycle takes shape over a period of 18.6 years, or an average of 18.6 years, and it's always separated by a recession or a mid-cycle slowdown. Now, what that looks like. So over our 18.6 year average. Now, after every downturn or after every recession, there's a recovery phase, which is a phase that lasts between 6 to 7 years. Okay. Now that's then followed by a mid-cycle dip. Now, we believe that this corona pandemic has brought this mid-cycle dip forward a few years.
Right.
So that mid-cycle dip historically lasts between 1 to 2 years.
Okay.
Now, after that mid-cycle dip occurs, and especially if we go back to the previous video that we did, and we looked at how the Australian property market has performed in similar events, it's very clear that there's a spike, especially in the Australian property market. So, which is called an explosive phase. Now, that typically lasts between 6 to 7 years. And after that 6 to 7 year mark, that's when things start to come off again, which would be known as a recession phase. So in regards to, I guess what that looks like and where this has come from. So there's the 18-year cycle is firmly grounded by economist David Ricardo and law of rent theory. So we have referenced that there for your viewers as well. I highly recommend reading this and looking further into this. We can send you all relevant links as well.
I can put those in the notes for this one. Yep.
Yep. So what's very clear again is land is in fixed supply. So when the economy grows, the price of land rises more rapidly than wages, right? Materials and other production requirements. And increasing bank credit raises land values. So what banks do, obviously, they lend against the land. That creates the land to rise. They lend it again. So they're creating money here. Purchasers need credit to purchase the land. The increased land values then provides collateral for added credit creation, which is what we just mentioned, that they're creating money. Now, when increasing demand for land no longer exists, predominantly due to affordability constraints and non-alignment with broader business feasibility requirements, land prices stagnate or fall. So that could be, when interest rates are quite low at the moment, and when the dust settles, everybody goes and buys property again. Banks will start to raise their interest rates at some stage, and then that's when affordability changes. And then that's if people can't afford land or property, that's when it starts to stagnate or fall, which really sort of leads into these cycles that we're talking about. Now, in the absence of credit creation, so when interest rates rise, for example, and that demand is not there, investments cease, economic activity stalls, and a downturn ensures. Okay, so this is where these mid-cycle downturns come from. Now, governments cannot afford this system to fail, so they provide stimulus through quantitative easing, fast-tracking major projects like infrastructure, and will even bail out banks if required. The government ultimately ensures that the cycle will repeat itself again. Now, seeing how the Australian government has acted during this COVID period, my belief in this is they're going to keep loading the cannon until they don't need to anymore. So they'll
what's
keep
different this time about the stimulus that they're giving us? After the GFC last time, they did stimulus. What's different now?
So very good question. The difference here is, yes, there was stimulus put into the economy post GFC. So they put that into the economy after the GFC. The difference is now, or today, is they've brought this stimulus is happening now. They've brought it all up front. So we know what the stimulus packages are. We know the amount of money going to the economy. We know that they're trying to stimulate jobs. We know that they're trying to keep us buoyant, which they will. So that's the difference between today and the GFC in regards to the stimulus in the economy. So it's guaranteed now, where it wasn't guaranteed during the GFC because we didn't know that it was coming.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, big difference.
Yeah. And I guess leading on to what these economists are predicting and following. There's an economist by the name of Phil Anderson, who's Australian actually. I guess he's written a book, so that's a reference to the book there. The book draws upon centuries of land data in the US, which demonstrates and consists of 18-year cycles in land markets, often ending in economic depression, right? Which is not uncommon. So if we have these depressions, which is what we've had historically, they're not uncommon. It's just about understanding that they happen. Now, based on this cyclical model, Anderson accurately predicts the GFC collapse around 2008. So he did predict the GFC. Now, during an interview in 2017, so we can call that recently, he also indicated the following would occur. He indicated a recession or near recession will occur in the US around 2021.
Well, he can hit bingo for that one, can't he?
Yeah, he did, and hopefully he's good at picking lotto numbers. So, so that is a prediction, right? So he has predicted that. And given the US generally enters into an economic downturn first, Australia normally follows suit. That goes back to saying when America gets a cold, when America sneezes, Australia gets a cold. And a mid-cycle correction is predicted for 2021, arriving at a peak around 25-26. Okay, so this is where they're expecting that strong run to happen up to 2026. Now, why is that key for us to understand? Is I guess we are in a role of helping people identify locations, identify assets, help them understand what their potential investment strategy is for property, right? Through that process, we're able to identify potential timeframes that clients have to build this asset base and when they potentially may need to sell as well. So for us to sort of understand, these economic cycles, I think is crucial because if we identify there's a client who may need to sell around 2026 or, 3 or 4 years after that, it may be a conversation around, based on historic data, should we bring that selling period a bit forward? Now, without giving that specific advice to anyone, for us, it's about educating them on this. And in regards to where we are at the moment, if we look at this historic data, if we go to the 1990 recession, up to the 2008 GFC, that was an 18-year time frame.
Yep.
Okay, and through that 18 years, we saw peaks in property, we saw troughs in property, we saw more peaks in property, we saw more troughs in property. Right, so we did go through a recovery phase. We did go through a mid-cycle dip. We did go through an explosive phase, and we definitely went through a recession phase. So that was 18 years.
Yep.
Now, if we look at the next 18 years, so from the GFC, there was a recovery phase after that, right, which is when the government stimulated the economy. There was that was the recovery phase. So 2008 up to 2026, this is now an 18-year gap or an 18-year time frame. So this is why these economists truly believe we are here at the moment. And with everything that's happening at the moment with COVID, we understand that sales rates are down. So there's no, people who don't have to sell aren't selling. Right? Nobody wants people walking through their homes, but there is going to be that mid-cycle dip. Now, some areas will be affected more than others. Others probably won't even see this. They won't even have the same effect. But when this dust settles, that's why they're predicting this explosive phase to happen up until 2026, because in 5 years' time, and I guess we're only looking at what the interest rates are at the moment and what they're predicted to be in 5 years, is there's no indication that they're going to start to raise interest rates. Money will still be extremely cheap when this dust settles.
Yep. And
for Australians, it's normally, when everything looks rosy again, it's back off to the races and business as usual.
Yep.
And that's why we kind of got to go, okay, well, let's just step back and go, well, where are we in this 18-year cycle? And should we be loading up as much as we possibly can? And what happens in 2026?
Yeah, well, obviously for, people who can afford to hold, it looks like, good times ahead, ready to rock and roll. So makes sense for those who can that, things will be better.
Yep. I think it's, if people can hold properties, and once again, it's all depending on your circumstances, and everybody gets that. But I think if you can hold, it'll be a nice reward for you at some stage.
Yeah. So it's a short-term pain right now for the long-term gain in the next 5-6 years.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, in regards to short-term pain, if there's no real pain or change in your cash flow, if you still have a job, you're very lucky. But I think the short-term pain only comes from just the uncertainty around what's going on.
Yep. Or your tenants lost their job and having trouble paying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for running through that with us, Alex. That's really interesting, going through those historical patterns and what's happening. So this is a little bit more about...
And just in conclusion to that as well, Amanda, it's all well and good to go, okay, well, we've seen these 18-year cycles and we're expecting a downturn, we're expecting a rise, but, what's the conclusion? I guess our conclusion here is if the system responds based on these historic patterns, we believe, and I think most people in property believe and understand, it will be challenging for real estate for the remainder of 2020. There are buying opportunities out there, absolutely, we're seeing that. However, we believe it's going to improve in 2021. The mid-cycle slowdown definitely has to work through COVID-19 challenges, especially around unemployment levels. I think when people start going back to work and it does become as close to business as usual as what it was, 2 or 3 months ago, we will see sentiment change. There will be a strong demand period up to 2026 due to excess capacity in the economy. And that's, once again, going back to the government all governments bringing all these infrastructure projects forward. And land values will peak in 2026. That's obviously what these economists are predicting. The system will potentially break. Massive liquidity challenges will exist, and circa GFC Mark II, right? Now, major infrastructure work and programs for the government will be fast-tracked to stimulate the economy again in 2027 and 2028, and circa 2029, that this 18-year cycle starts again. So that's where we're at.
Right. So aside from not having a crystal ball, we've got history that shows us the cycles and what's historically come and gone and what could well be ahead.
Absolutely. And once again, we do have to put that big, caveat and a big asterisk that nobody has a crystal ball. And we're not saying that we do, and we're not saying this is exactly what's going to happen. What we're just helping people understand is property, businesses, economies, they're all cyclical. And if we look about, what's happened, it's identified that happened in 18-year cycles, right? So if we look at 18 years prior to where we're at now, what has happened, and 18 years prior to that, and 18 years prior to that, it's very clear that they're all running this cycle.
Yep. Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that, Alex. It's been very interesting to talk through all those cycles and what's been happening for the 18.
I know it's often taken, Amanda, but hopefully, it helps somebody and the message gets out there.
Yeah, I think, look, what I'm taking away from that is for those who can afford to, good times ahead. And look, most people I think understand when they go into property that this is a long-term hold. This isn't something that I'll do 4 or 5 years and see how I go. That you do need to give it 10, 15-year run to really see the benefits. So
absolutely, and understanding your strategy is probably the most crucial point there, which is what there's professionals out there that can help you with that, and that's what we do.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Have a good day.
You too.